So a couple of months ago, my friend Mike actually calls me and he says, "Hey man, would you want to audition for this band that I've been a part of? Maybe play some gigs in the future. I think there could actually be a lot of potential for us to have a lot of fun here." Now, with me being where I was at the time, I was like, "Absolutely, man." My thought process going in was like, "I've been doing all this practicing. What's the point of all that if all I'm ever going to do is play at church on Sundays, which I love and is a lot of fun, but is a little bit more structured than what I was looking for with the stuff that I was practicing on a daily basis." And with Mike also being a guitar player, I thought this would be a really cool opportunity, not just to grow as a player, but to get some really cool feedback from a guy who I really respected his chops. So I get to this gig and I'm insanely nervous. I mean, they had me memorize about 30 songs for our set list, and that's about 4 or 5 times more than anything that I'm used to doing on a regular basis. So my palms are like super sweaty. All I'm thinking is that I'm hoping that some of the cues that I wrote down on my phone will actually be helpful during the audition process. And while I'm looking at these cues, I end up taking my guitar case out of my car. I bring it in, and Mike looks at me and he goes, "Oh, shoot, dude, which guitar did you bring today?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, dude, I brought my Telecaster." With it being so versatile and this being a classic rock gig, it's my first time I've ever really played classic rock live. I thought it would be pretty much appropriate for anything that we could potentially play. And that's when Mike kind of looks at me and he gives me this grin. Now, I've known Mike for a little bit and I had seen that grin before, so I knew exactly in that moment what he was about to say. And he opens his mouth and he goes, "Mike, you know me. You know I love Telecasters. However, everyone and their mother continually tells me that they are the most versatile guitar on the planet, and I will continually deny that until the day I die." Now, this wasn't necessarily the first conversation that me and Mike had ever had on this topic, which is why this shouldn't have surprised me at all. We had gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with different guitars, every single brand, on trying to figure out which one was actually the most versatile. Now, even though I am a Strat guy through and through, simply because of the sheer number of instances that this Tele has gotten me out of a bind, I tended to agree with that statement. I mean, they might be known for country on a baseline level, but I've seen jazz players use Teles. I've seen funk players use Teles. I've seen metal players go really ham with Telecasters, and even nowadays, they're getting really big amongst like those math rock kids who everyone loves. I mean, it all just kind of made sense, and I defended my points. But then Mike said something that I didn't really expect to hear from someone like myself who happened to be like a worship and currently playing classic rock and country player. He says to me, "Mike, I'll tell you right now, the most versatile guitar of all time is the Les Paul." Now, I heard that and immediately I was a little dumbfounded. And don't get me wrong, I love a good Les Paul with some P90s. But even knowing we had this shared respect for this guitar, it was very strange for me to hear someone around my age call a Les Paul the most versatile guitar of all time. Not just to love it, but to actively call it the most versatile guitar of all time. And this is where I knew I was going to have to go and really test things for myself. Like, really see, is this kid just blowing smoke and trying to be different from everyone else in our generation? Or is there some actual merit to what he's implying? And that sort of brings me to today, where I realized that in order to accurately test this hypothesis, there would actually be a different question that first needed to be asked. Because if you're going to find out if the Les Paul is the most versatile guitar, you first have to figure out which is actually the most versatile Les Paul. And there could hypothetically be a million different answers to that question. I mean, some people like the 50s style. You have the studios that happen to have the coil splits that people were divided on, pun intended. You also have the ones with the P90s that people like me tend to love and prefer. But then a couple weeks ago, I happened to actually remember a guitar that to me might actually answer this question. And it was lying right by the side of my bed and has been for a couple of months. And the more and more I started to rationalize these different points and really think about it, the more I figured out that this might actually be the one. And spoiler alert, it's not actually a Gibson. It's been like a hot minute since I've showed this guy, and that makes me very excited. You guys ready for this? So this right here happens to be my D'Angelico Brighton. I've had it for about 8 or 9 months now, and I randomly picked it up a couple days ago, and I instantly realized that this machine, this non-Gibson, might actually be the most versatile of its kind, and here's why. Now, upon first seeing this, you're probably thinking to yourself, "Mike, this is definitely not a Les Paul, it's a D'Angelico. We can see it and read it from the headstock." However, I would point to the fact that there's a very clear resemblance between something like this and a Les Paul double cut shape, just with a few variations on this. The Les Paul double cut usually has P90s, with the D'Angelico actually opting for humbuckers, more specifically Seymour Duncans in this model. But the real unique thing about this guitar making it just so versatile is the actual coil split. Now, this is where you're going to, pun intended, split a lot of people, because I have noticed that guitar players have very strong, differing, varying opinions on whether or not they actually like coil splits in their Gibsons. But that's where I think something like this, not being a Gibson and having very different expectations going in, can actually have a leg up on the competition. But I do tend to think this coil split is very different from a lot of the ones that I've played over the years. But let me not tell you, let me actually show you. Now, here's where things get very interesting, because if I were to be completely honest with you, this is by no means the best sounding coil split I've ever played in my life. But I do think it covers the most ground. Now, what do I mean by that? I think a lot of coil splits, even when they sound really good, tend to sound like watered down versions of whatever the humbucker is, maybe just a little bit thinner. But this right here sounds like a completely different pickup. And that was one of the things that I first noticed that made it the most versatile. So you have the humbucker, right? And then you split it. It's like a completely different sound. Now that's on top of the fact that you do have the humbuckers that are super warm and sound amazing, but the more and more I play it, the more different tones I got, the more I realize these are two completely different sounds. Like I said before, that's really where it starts to feed into the versatility factor of feeling like you're getting more than just one guitar because of the coil split. And once you get into the middle position, you can really blend the different coil split options. It's like you get 5,000 new variations. Because you realize it's not just humbucker versus single coil, right? You're starting out with the single coil. And then you're going humbucker in the neck, single coil in the bridge. And then you're doing it the other way around. You're realizing you have a million different combinations. And the thing that I really like is that it can still do the Les Paul thing very faithfully. Like if you go humbucker in the bridge pickup, get a Marshall style amp dialed in. However, it still has a little bit of D'Angelico in there. So it's like you're getting what you want, but there's still like a little bit of flavor to make it stand out and make you go, ooh, what is that? I mean, this is it, the plexi thing, right? There is one more question we kind of need to answer before we reach our big point of deciding whether this is really the most versatile Les Paul style guitar, or at least the one that I've played. And that's the question of, does versatility even matter? That may at first glance seem like a really weird question, but it's something I've been thinking more and more and more about when it comes to guitars as a whole, because a lot of guitars aren't necessarily meant to be versatile, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Take, for example, a guitar like this. This is my SRV Signature. It is an incredible sounding guitar, but it's not really the most versatile thing ever. You wouldn't see a lot of metal players going for this if this was their first guitar and they wanted to, for some reason, do a mix of metal and jazz. It's really meant for blues players, and that's what the Texas Special pickup sound has really become known for. I'm not saying the guitar would explode if you tried to play jazz on it, but most jazz players wouldn't go for something like this. And that's okay. That's what the guitar is made for. It's made to do one thing really, really, really well. Again, that's not to say versatility never matters. I mean, ask anyone who's ever played in a cover band who's had to play Back in Black by AC/DC, followed by The Best Part by Daniel Caesar, and had to switch in like 7 seconds and had to get both of those tones to sound perfect. And if that's the hypothetical equation that we're dealing with in that scenario, I genuinely do think that D'Angelico, probably the most versatile Les Paul style guitar on the market, in my opinion. And I think a lot of that comes down to the way that they're able to market it and manufacture it, simply because it doesn't have all of that weight of being a Les Paul and having all those expectations over the last 100 years of whether or not it's the Slash guitar, the classic rock guitar, or whatever. People have their associations with what they want in a Les Paul. I think it's really cool because a lot of times I thought this as the Neo Soul Instagram guitar, but it's so much more than that and can do so many things, and it's so versatile. And to answer the really big question, even with this, do I think the Les Paul is the most versatile guitar ever made? Probably not. I still think my friend Mike is wrong, but I do think there are some genuinely incredibly versatile Les Paul style guitars out there, like some double humbucker things that are really pushing the boundaries of like what I even think that guitar can do in the first place and how many different scenarios I can use it in to get not just an acceptable tone, but in a lot of cases an ideal tone for what I'm looking for. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what you think. So please let me know, what do you think is the most versatile guitar ever made? Do you think it's the Les Paul? Do you think it's the Tele? Do you think it's the Strat? Do you think it's something else? And what do you think is the most versatile Gibson guitar that they've ever made? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. It was a lot of fun to be able to take the Brighton out of the case for the first time in a couple months, and it felt just like I remembered it to. It's a very smooth playing guitar, and I really enjoy it. I'm just really just curious to see what else D'Angelico has going on, especially since I know they make a couple guitars that just vary slightly, like the Eric Krasno model from this. But if you want to know anything more about this guitar, the links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do, or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all my patrons. If you want to join the community and see some more exclusive stuff, the links are down below. Make sure to check it out. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. And most importantly, like most important of all, have a fantastic night.